We are recording. Good deal. How's everybody doing? I hope well. Marking down the time here. Make sure I give a good effort. All right. So you ready for me to keep on running around the globe as I talk about world civilizations? We were in Europe last week, what later became known as Europe, Mesopotamian time, Greek era. So now we're going to head over to the pre-Columbian Americas, Mexican part of North America, and then down in Central America and South America, with a nice mix of Mayans, Aztecs, and Incans. Okay. People that don't know their history too much can find out that their buildings, pyramids, and knowledges were comparable to Greek and other cultures of that time in the other area, but they didn't know about each other, as long as we know, right? So if I look at my calendar, today is the 26th of April, okay? 26th of April. So let's move on with this. Share the screen. Go to the material. There we go. Let me start the slideshow. Oops. Okay, go from the beginning. Hey, whoops. Let me go one back here. Come on now, work. There we go. Previous, thank you. Let me get myself out of here. Yay. As I say every week, we need to hear me. We don't need to see me. So like I said before, it's for April 26th, but a little sidebar. If you're keeping tracks of weeks, it's week 4. So there we go, the Americas of the 15th century. So the Americas produced 2 of the world's 6 independent cradles. Cradles is what a baby sleeps in, but when you use it as a slang term, describing an area, it usually about something they produce or have, right? So it was the cradle of agriculture in these areas were Mexico and Peru. And this is considered worldwide. As in Eurasia and Africa, which we learned about earlier, agricultural villages in the Americas had grown into small cities in ancient times, becoming larger urban societies during the classical period under consideration here. So again, you go from a hunting and gathering group to some small agriculture. Now that you have ready produce to eat and you don't have to go and hunt and gather for it, you get a small town. And then if you get more people involved in it and the more they produce, bingo, bango, boingo, now you have a city, right? So this happened in Eurasia and Africa, Greece, and now you're seeing that happen here too. So it looks like more of a human thing. It's just a logical sequence that humans will go through. So, and then they become larger urban societies, like I said, during the classical period under consideration here. We resume the story of pre-Columbian, which means before the Spanish came, civilizations by describing the states that arose or came forth during the classical period. After the fall of the Olmec, they were the ancient ones, at least the ones recorded in Mexico, and the Chavin in Peru before the Incans. The Maya in Mesoamerica will exemplify or show the classical period because their written chronicles provide much more information that is available about the non-literate peoples of South America, which tells you other Indian groups did not know how to read and write. What we know is that toward the end of the pre-Columbian history, the Aztec and the Inca subjugated the previous regional states in their homelands. So subjugated means you conquered and used the people any way you wanted to, slaves, workforce, or sacrifice. Aztecs killed a lot of people. Mayans did do some sacrifice too. So, and these are in the regional states in their homelands. And then, of course, the Spanish came later and subjugated them. Meanwhile, the civilizations of North America's woodlands had already learned to cultivate locally available food crops as early as 1000 BCE. Just before the beginning of the Common Era, the Mesoamerican Three Sisters. So I was thinking maybe that's a good question to sneak in on the midterm. Who were the three sisters? And then I'll get my funny student say, I was Maria, Josefina, and Encogen. No, I don't think so. The three sisters here were the first maize, which is kind of like a copying of the Spanish maíz, which means corn, squash, and then beans, right? So that's why you see Mexican food today. And it sure has a lot of beans, right? And these folks made their way, and these foods too made their way north. The effects were the same, and soon more settled, more food. You don't have to hunt and start doing your own stuff. It's there, so more people come and settle. And then once you have a large group of people settling, complex civilizations appear. First group we're going to talk about are the Maya. Okay. Around 300 CE, the Olmecs declined in importance, supplanted, or the people who took their place were their Maya neighbors. Yes, they were neighbors. The Maya became the most advanced of all the pre-Columbian Amerindians by building on ancient cultural traditions. For example, the Mayan written language and complex calendar were derived from Olmec prototypes. So what that means is they just didn't themselves create this fantastic Mayan calendar or their own language. They were kind of copied. So I don't know what the percentage was, 50-50, I don't know, 70-30, but they were kind of copied off the Olmec prototypes. And that's a common theme throughout history in any countries that you go to. A lot of times society disappears or they're conquered, and whatever good things they have, if they're smart, the new conquerors will kind of put into their own government and system. The Mayan understanding of mathematics included the concept of zero and was far more advanced than European mathematics in the 12th century. How do you like that? Higher advanced mathematics than, Europe at the time, developing Europe. Their calendar was the most accurate of its time. It's even more accurate than the one that we use in the States now. The recent decipherment or translation of over half of the Mayan written language has enabled or allowed scholars to more accurately reconstruct or rebuild the events portrayed in the rich pictorial images. So we'll see an image here. So I'd like to hit these sidebars for you. 400 BCE to 800 CE, classical Mayan civilization, Teotihuacan. So again, Mayans to the south, Teotihuacan is to the center. So Teotihuacan is related to the Aztecs. 1 to 500 CE, Middle Woodlands civilizations. So I guess the last of your hunter and gatherers. 400 to 700 CE, agricultural settlements in Southwest USA. So even like Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Pueblo Indians, right? 500 to 1000, late Woodlands civilizations, 700 to 1300 CE. Puebloan, like I said, they make the pueblos in the side of the mountains. Period in the Four Corners region of the USA. That's a point where all those areas I mentioned in the Southwest connect. 1100 to 1532, the Inca Empire of what is now Peru. 1305 and 1521, Aztec Federation. So I'm at the bottom of the page, so you know what happens next. It's question time. Okay. We go to the whiteboard. Get that pencil. Question 1. We always like to start with question 1. I don't know why. The Americas produce 2 of the world's what? Let me try to extend this. Can I do it all in one line? 1, 2, 3. Yes, I did. So for my funny guys, I don't want to hear they produced 2 of the first hybrid motor vehicles. No, not at that time. Or my other funny guys that are going to say, did they invent the first hamburger? No. Okay. It'll be too funny now. Question 2. Okay, bear with me on this question. Which understanding did the Mayans have that surpassed European knowledge? So it clearly states there in the reading. So I'll extend this one a little bit. And give you a few to answer that, or those 2 questions, all right? Okay, you guys doing good on that? All right. Grab the eraser. Again, repeating, the Americas produced 2 of the world's what? These were very important things. 2, which understanding did the Mayans have that surpassed European knowledge? And this is something of a high level skill, right? Go back here to the material. So we did stop here on rich pictorial images. Push that over. And by the way, for 1E and each one, that was page 187. Okay. 87. Okay, so we have a nice photo here showing you again, this is Mexico, Teotihuacan and Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztecs, is in the valley or the center of Mexico. The Mayans, which predated them, go on to the southern end of Mexico, and this is Palenque, this is still Mexico here. But you start getting into Guatemala and Belize, El Salvador, Honduras, that's how far the Mayan empire went. And the people there, their ancestors still speak the Quechua language. Okay. So down here, the Aztec Empire was at its height or height of success when the Spanish arrived. The Mayan cities of Palenque and Tikal were abandoned in the north. We don't know why the Mayans did this. It says here unknown reasons, possibly failure of the food supply. Okay. So there's your map. So as we continue with the written word of Mayan stonework, also, although much remains obscure. So a lot of their language was written on stonework, but they're not able to translate all of it. All in all, more is known about the life of the Mayan people, though, than about any of the other Mesoamericans. That's because you'll find out later that the Spanish, or excuse me, the Aztecs had great libraries full of their books and their history, but the Spanish people burnt the library and most of the books. They thought they were evil. Too bad. Can't learn about their beginnings now. The historical outline is now fairly clear. From about 400 BCE, there emerged or came forth a hierarchy of Mayan cities, some more important than others. And they were ruled by hereditary kings, which means it's a bloodline. It's not like here where we vote a president. It's like if you're a king, your son's going to be a king, and then your grandson's going to be a king. The earliest great Maya ceremonial centers arose in the rainforest that straddles present-day Mexico and Guatemala. Recent discoveries in Guatemala reveal that the first flourishing, or meaning successful Mayan cities, occurred in the 2nd century BCE, much earlier than previously thought. After the decline and fall of these cities, the same rainforest saw a rebirth of Mayan grandeur, known as the Classical Era, 400 to 800 CE. Some cities contained several tens of thousands of people, but most of the population were peasant, which means poor people, villagers, who lived in satellite settlements on the city's periphery. So they lived on these maybe poorer constructions on the outside of the city. The whole population of the Mayan Empire or Federation may have reached 14 million at its tops, far and away the largest state under one government outside Asia at that time. So some comparable things. We talked about Greece and Middle East, and then here we're comparing this to Asia. World civilization, folks. Public buildings of truly amazing dimensions, which means size, made up the heart of the cities. Temples, palaces, and ball courts, many of them employing the blunt-tipped pyramid form, were arranged around a massive arena or assembly ground. These ball courts, yes, you'll learn about that. To these sacred precincts at designated times would stream or come tens of thousands to experience the priest-led worship ceremonies or the installation of a new monarch, which means king. The cities seem to have been more religious and administrative centers than commercial and manufacturing centers. None of them approach the size of Mesopotamian towns of a much earlier epoch. The Mayan further developed and expanded the previous trade networks, sending traveling merchants to trade salt and cacao. Cacao is like a chocolate, but these were the beans you sold and you made the chocolate. For jade, beautiful green jade, which is very popular in China, obsidian, and tropical bird feathers, which were considered very expensive, among other goods. The political and social power rested as with, so you know we're at the bottom of that page, that would be 188 for Yishuan. So it's question time again. So for that whiteboard, pencil time, question 3. See if I can extend that a bit. The Mayan Empire may have reached a population of what? So just give me the top number of folks that they had. Just looking for a number. I don't mean a phone number. 4. Describe Mayan cities. Okay, for my funny folks, I'm not asking you to tell me, well, I don't know what colors they painted the city, or I don't know if they had street lights or horses running around. That's not what I'm asking you. I'm just going along with the information given in the reading. And that the cities, how were they structured to, how did they function for the city, for the people? What was done importantly in the city, right? So that's how I want you to describe it, okay? So let me give you a minute for those two. Okay, you think you got a hold of that? All right. All right, let me grab that eraser. Okay, repeating, the Mayan Empire may have reached a population of what? Give me that number. Don't fool around with small numbers. Like, I think it was 100,000. No, but they were in the jungle. Doesn't matter. Okay, 4, describe Mayan cities. Again, tell me how they were set up and functioned as cities, not the paint jobs or how many, if you think they had taco stands, that's not what I'm asking, okay? All right. Stop the share, go back to the material. So, we stopped at the bottom where it says power rested as with. We have to head on to the next page. There's that clicker. Come here, clicker. Arrow's hiding on me. Okay. So let me get into this picture first. This is a Mayan calendar stone. So you might be asking, why is it round? You'll find out. This is the actual calendar information area. So you can see their language is written in hieroglyphics, just like the Egyptians wrote in hieroglyphics, not in a set form of letters. And we also have a ball player. So there's the big ball here. They had these big courts for ball playing. And what it doesn't tell you here is that the losing team usually had their heads cut off. But that's another issue, okay? So here we go about the roundness of the stone in the calendar. Agrarian Native Americans, so again, we remember that term, believed in natural time. Their calendars were circular, and they carefully represented and recorded key astronomical phenomena. Yes, they studied the stars. They were astronomers. Usually solar and lunar cycles on which they based their time cycles. To keep the sky in motion and thus to assure the regularity of the seasons, many Mesoamerican civilizations played a ritual ball game whose purpose was to keep the ball, which represented the sun, in constant motion. The connection between time and the game is represented here, if you can read this. And from what I remember too, they played kind of like soccer. You could not touch it with your hands, but any other part of your body was okay. So into the written stuff. Okay, will that thing go up now? Please go up. Okay. the Olmec in hands of hereditary elites. So we went from the Olmec to these Mayans who kings were decided on bloodlines. To judge from their costumes and surviving artwork, they were very wealthy. They wore a lot of gold and silver. And like I said, we learned that the tropical birds' feathers were very expensive. The common folk or regular people appear to have been divided into free men, serfs. Serfs wasn't too good. It was almost like a slave, but you could actually get land and some rewards for your work. And you worked for a certain amount of time. Slaves were probably slaves forever. And as in much of the ancient world, this happened. Stone carvings show that Mayan noble women held important positions in religion and politics and enjoyed certain rights. Women of the lower classes tended the family garden and domestic animals. They did the weaving, making those baskets, and probably led the home religious rites. Interesting. Religious belief was paramount, which means the most important in ordering the rounds of daily life. So your life rerounded about religion. The ruling class included priests who had magical powers given to them by the gods, or so they said. The pyramids were sacred mountains with cave-like inner chambers where priests meditated with supernatural sphere. In the Mayan cosmology, or how they thought of their world, there existed 13 heavens and 9 hells. I think 1 hell is enough for me. I can't handle, 9 hells. The Mayan underworld seems to have been as fearsome as that of Mesopotamia. So they shared the same thing with Greeks, that if you go to hell, it's a place you never want to be. No hint of ethical religion exists, however. So what that means is, like, let's say Christianity, where they tell you, be kind to your brother, turn the other cheek, always be fair, good things will happen to you. That really didn't exist in this religion. It just was a devotion to the gods, not so much to your brother. The gods, like those of Sumeria, played multiple roles in human affairs. And in their persons, they combined beastly and human traits. So animals and human traits mixed together. Human sacrifices were apparently common. That means they killed folks. Usually the method was to cut open their chest and pull out the beating heart and offer it to the gods. Not a nice way to die. And this provided the rulers with companions on their journey to the next world. Wow. Once again, prosperity inevitably brought decline, which means success brings decline. There's overpopulation. Too many people came to the city. And ecological collapse forced the people to abandon the great centers. Like ecological, live in a forest, you don't know what's going to happen. Rainfall, floods, mudslides. A final revival occurred in the Yucatan, which is about the end of Mexico, between about 1000 and 1300 CE, this time with artistic influence from the Valley of Mexico, which is in the center. By the time the Spanish under Cortez arrived in the Valley of Mexico 200 years later, the Mayan achievements had been forgotten. That's pretty sad that they disappeared mysteriously. Their memory has been revived by the 19th and 20th century discoveries of great stone pyramids and temples in the remote Mexican rainforest and in the Yucatan Peninsula. These sites have now become major tourist attractions, especially Chichen Itza, where a vast complex of Mayan buildings has been excavated, or in the simple terms, dug up. The Mayan ruins are an American, or America's, version of Egypt's Tel Amarna or Karnak. So, the cities over there by the pyramids. Indeed, some anthropologists postulate or theorize or guess that a human link existed between ancient Egypt and Mexico. However, most scientists think that ancient peoples around the globe independently devised the concept of pyramidal structures as a tribute to the gods and to the priestly elites. So what that mumbo jumbo is saying is that, hey, they have very similar things. You have the giant pyramids in Egypt, and you have these Mayan pyramids and later the Aztecs. So there must have been a connection somehow, even though seafarers supposedly could not travel that far. They just traveled, locally. They didn't go across the world. There was no airplane flight, no multimedia, no communication. But some anthropologists say there must have been some kind of, we just don't know how they did it. And then the other part of this is just saying, no, maybe just humans from all around the globe somehow decided that pyramids were the best structures or buildings to pay tribute to the gods. The most notable accomplishment of the Maya in science was their astoundingly accurate astronomy. Like I said, they were astronomers based on an equally refined mathematics, probably the highest mathematics in the world at the time. The Mayan calendar had two distinct numeration systems, allowing them to construct a chronology or line of order that could date events for a space of more than 2,000 years. How the hell do you do that? Obviously, it's beyond my technical ability. In literature, little survived the Spanish colonial censorship. So that's what I'm telling you about the Spanish, that this stuff has to be evil. So let's just destroy it. A foolish way of thinking. But the Maya were the only pre-Columbian people who completed the transition to full literacy. So that means all of their peoples were able to read and write. The handful of codices, ancient documents, is supplemented by extensive sculpted glyphs decorating the exterior and interior of the monuments the Maya left behind. And these tell a story. And if you're able to translate those, you can read it and then understand it. Unfortunately, these materials tell us little to nothing of the political or social life of the era because they are mostly concerned with the events in the reign of one or more monarchs. So they're always talking about the greatness of this king and that king. And that's why they're on the outside of the buildings. They don't spend time saying, hey, the average guy, made stonework for 20 years and he retired. The average family had 3 kids, whatever. And that's what people want to know, the daily life of most of the population. So now we have Teotihuacan, which I have been to. During the same era, when the classical Mayan surge was reaching its peak, another high culture was appearing in the valley in the center of Mexico, some hundreds of miles west of Yucatan. The metropolis of Teotihuacan arose in the rich farmlands in the northern part of the valley around 200 BCE. Later arrivals in the valley named the city Teotihuacan, which means place of the gods. It was a fortified city, unfortified, which means it didn't have soldiers around there. A theocracy devoted more to agriculture, crafts, and commerce than to war. Wow. Which is nice and peaceful, and everybody can go tra-la-la, but not good for protecting you when tough guys roll into town, so to speak. Like the cities of the Olmecs and the Maya, Teotihuacan's great pyramids and temples were centers of religious rituals and offerings to the gods, who were so crucial to settled agriculture. So they felt the gods were the most important and granted them a good harvest or not. 2 pyramids at Teotihuacan, the so-called pyramids of the sun and the moon, are among the largest masonry structures ever built. And they mean in the world. Okay. So they're comparing them to any wonders of the world. Okay, so we're at the bottom there, the pyramid of. So, I got to go back and get into some questions. So hit the stop share. Share screen, whiteboard, pencil, right? And we're off to question 5. Five, Chichen Itza Mayan ruins are the America's versions of what? So they were compared to another ancient civilizations, city compared to what? So it's pretty clear which city they compared them to in which country. Okay. 6. So here, let me see if I can extend this to a one-liner. Name the 2 pyramids at Teotihuacan. Okay, this is from the Aztec line. So let me give you a couple of minutes to get into those. Okay, let me go for the eraser. Again, repeating 5. Chichen Itza Mayan ruins are the Americas version of what? Compare those to ruins in another country that are very famous. 6. Oh, I forgot to put 6 here, but we know what we're doing. Name the 2 pyramids at Teotihuacan. So don't say Burger King and Five Guys. Okay, that's gone. Stop share. Back to the material. So you see we're down here, the pyramid of, which means I got to turn the page. And here we have it. This is the moon pyramid. And then this picture is probably taken from the sun. This is the Valley of the Dead, right? I don't know why they called it that, but I've been here, Teotihuacan, maybe twice, and I've climbed the Pyramid of the Moon and the Sun. Can be a little narrow and steep. It's not an easy thing. And I've had people stop at the middle out of breath. So yeah, but I've actually been there. Haven't been to Egypt, but been here. So here we go. Like I said, the Avenue of the Dead at Teotihuacan. The ceremonial heart of the city, the Avenue of the Dead, was lined with dozens of temples. So there were temples on top of these steps. And pyramids, like the gigantic pyramid of the sun shown at the upper left. Okay, so I'm on the opposite side. This is the sun, so this is the moon we're at. Here, feather-clad priests carried out elaborate daily rituals and sacrifices to the god, like Quetzalcoatl, which was the serpent god, who regulated such matters as fertility, which means having babies, rainfall, childbirth, and even the arts. So on to the written material. Pyramid of the Sun is actually larger in total volume than the Great Pyramid of Egypt. So maybe the Great Pyramid of Egypt is higher, but there's more volume in the sun. Teotihuacan, perhaps the first true city of the Western Hemisphere, okay, was unusual in that its inhabitants included more than just priests and nobles. Although the houses of the elites filled its center, it was laid out in barrios, or quarters, for the ordinary people who farmed the fields surrounding the city. So they let some poor folks live in the city, but they had to do the farming. It grew to become the largest and most impressive of all the ancient pre-Columbian centers, with a population as high as 200,000, far greater than any of the contemporary European city. Teotihuacan was a hub of commerce, which means a center. Its trade networks reached from northern Mexico to Central America. Recent discoveries show that Teotihuacan was allied with classical Mayan kings who proudly traced their lineage back to the invading ruler of Teotihuacan. Interesting. In the final years of its dominance, Teotihuacan seems to have become more militaristic, so they got a little more violent and angry style, you know. So I guess conquests do that to you. And then perhaps to enforce tribute demands, which means make people pay tribute to them and the gods, and to support its burgeoning or growing population. Invading warriors destroyed Teotihuacan in about 650 CE, ushering in 2 centuries of chaos and conflict amongst the rival groups in the valley. Over the next 2 centuries, the cultural heritage of Teotihuacan would endure, and subsequent regimes would revive and expand its trade networks. The identity of Teotihuacan's builders was lost. Like, who were these guys that built this place? They were probably killed by the invaders. But they would be revered or well respected by later arrivals in the valley as creator gods whose ruined city became a sacred site. So it became a sacred site and they respected those folks. The Aztec Federation. After the fall of Deltiwakan, several waves of warlike nomads from the north migrated into the Central Valley. So remember, it was an unfortified city. So like I said, if bad boys come to town, you don't have a lot to defend yourself with when you're just considered about the arts and being kind. Modern Mexico derives or takes its name from the last of these groups, the Mexica, known later as the Aztecs. Beginning in the 1300s, in the space of 200 years, the Mexica Aztec people converted themselves from despised nomads into the elite of a huge militaristic state embracing many millions of Amerindians. By 1500, other alliances and aggressive territorial expansions, the Aztec Confederation dominated the center of present-day Mexico from coast to coast and reached down into Mayan lands in present-day Guatemala. Their capital, the splendid city of Tenochtitlan, was the largest in the New World in the 1400s and one of the largest anywhere. These achievements were based on the foundation provided by early Amerindian civilizations, but the Aztecs contributed some new characteristics. So we're at the bottom of 190 for Lonnie. That means I got to go back to the whiteboard. Pencil. Question 7. Let me put the number this time. Teotihuacan has been described as perhaps what? Let me see how I can extend this. Can I do a one-liner? Yes. What I'm looking for here is itself what it was by being itself. What did this accomplish in world history, okay, for that time? So what did it accomplish? 8. Describe the Aztecs' beginnings. Let me put this correctly. Oh boy, I missed a letter there. And let me stretch it out. I can make a one-liner out of this. There we go. So where did they come from? What kind of people were they as described in the beginning as they came to the valley? Okay, so let me give you a few on those two. Again, that's page 190. Okay, you doing okay on that? It's time for me to get the eraser. All right. Eraser. So again, Teotihuacan has been described as perhaps what? So just being itself, its construction at that time, what did this accomplish? And 8, describe the Aztecs' beginnings. Where did they come from and what kind of people were they, okay, before they took over central Mexico? That's all. Proceed. So we ended down here at the bottom. The Aztecs contribute some new characteristics. Proceeding to 191. Here we have another map. Eventually we'll get down here into Peru when we talk about the Incan people. But again, Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital in the center of Mexico, heading down to the bottom. Chichen Itza, the end of Mexico there, Tikal, and then you get into Copal, which I think is in Guatemala. Okay. So the Aztec, Incan, and Mayan civilizations. The relative size of the three best known pre-Columbian states at their maximum extent. So this you'll see will be the extent of the Incan. Only the Incan Empire relied on a vast network of roads. What purpose did these roads serve? Okay.